Good afternoon and welcome to the Malcolm Renfrew Colloquium for Tuesday, October 26th of 2021. And as you can see from the slide, we are 10 years on to the Idaho Bach Festival. Actually, this is year 11. I think it's fitting that as the Renfrew Colloquium observes its 20th anniversary that we recognize and salute our friends and colleagues in the School of Music who have made this Bach Festival something remarkable going back to 2011. So before introducing our two presenters, let me just first say welcome back to our virtual colloquium after last week's tour of the Idaho Central Credit Union Arena. Wonderful field trip, and I hope that we can do more out and about events on campus in the spring. The original theme for the symposium involved visiting faculty members in their studios and labs and getting a chance to see them in a more informal environment, and I hope we can do that in the spring. Next week on November 2nd, which is Election Day, but we also have a colloquium by Assistant Professor Lucas Jungvorst from the Department of Psychology and Communication. Lucas is fairly new to the University of Idaho, arriving in fall of 2019. He'll speak about contextual influences on interpersonal interactions. And if you're on the Renfrew email announcement list, you can read the full abstract later this week. But today we're eager to hear from Miranda Wilson and Christopher Pfund about the Idaho Bach Festival. And so Professor Pfund has performed a critical acclaim with countless major orchestras and oratorial festivals throughout North America. And he is an associate professor of voice. Miranda Wilson, associate professor of cello, has performed as a soloist and chamber musician on 5 continents. And we were joking last week about which were the 5 continents, but it does not include Antarctica, she assured me. Professor Wilson enjoys writing books about playing the cello, including her soon-to-be published memoir, The Well-Tempered Cello, Life with Bach's Cello Suites. And Professor Wilson is going to start off today's presentation. So welcome to our guests and welcome to the audience.
Thank you, Kenton, for this wonderful introduction and for inviting us to this week's Renfrew Colloquium. It seems quite fitting to celebrate the anniversary of the Bach Festival this way. Malcolm Renfrew was a great supporter of the Lionel Hampton School of Music, and in fact, he was present at our very first Idaho Bach Festival concert. So it's wonderful and a great honor to be able to present at a colloquium bearing his name. It's hard to believe also that the Idaho Bach Festival is 10 years old. 10 years ago this semester, my former colleague, Mike Murphy, who is now living in Texas, but at the time he was our director of choral activities, Mike Murphy came into my office and he said that he wanted to start a Bach festival. Now, he's a great Bach scholar as well as a choral conductor. And he wanted to get together with other like-minded faculty members just to play some of the music that we loved. At the time, the people who were most heavily involved were Mike himself, me, our flute professor, Leonard Garrison, and our then organ professor, Susan Dillon, all of whom were big early music enthusiasts. We started small. We just wanted to play some of Bach's music that we loved so much, but the festival has grown and developed and evolved. And today, my newer co-director, Chris Pfund, who joined in 2015 to become my co-director when Mike stepped down, we'd like to talk about things that have happened in the festival over the years, our own research and how it has been influenced by our participation in the festival, and also what to expect from this year's festival. We have events tonight and tomorrow night. So Chris, I'll let you introduce what we're about to do.
Yeah, so we have a wonderful performance tonight for everyone. We have faculty, solos, and ensembles. We have, of course, Leonard Garrison, who was mentioned. We have, he'll be performing, let's see, Lynette Pfund, who is my way better half, will be singing. And Aneta Larty, and many other faculty. Of course, Miranda is going to be playing, and many other faculty members that we have. We'll also be joined by a faculty and friend of New St. Andrews College. So that will be good to have a little bit of cross-population of other Bach enthusiasts within our community. On Wednesday, then we have this, we have student solos and ensembles, and this will be the first time that we're doing them in the evening. Many of you may have recalled walking through the Commons and seeing our student performance in the midday. Because of not wanting to freak out anybody or to have any issues with unsafe practices, we're going ahead and moving those to the evening. And we open that up to our students. And we're really excited because our new director of choral activities or choral music, Dr. David Clement, is going to be leading all of these students, the orchestra and the choirs, in a performance of Bach Cantata 80. I think it's Ein feste Burg, right? Ist unser Gott. So that is a very famous, popular chorale tune and cantata of Bach's, and it will feature student soloists. It'll feature student orchestra and also the bandoliers, as well as the first half of that concert. We'll have performances by solo performances by students. So we're excited to offer that on Wednesday night. Let's see, that performance will be in the administrative auditorium, that solo concert, that solo and ensemble concert for the students. So you may see on the calendar that it is in Haddock on the online calendar, but just make a note, we'll try to fix that, but make a note that that's in the administrative auditorium. Tonight is in Haddock Performance Hall. Back to you, Miranda.
Thank you, Chris. I thought it would be fun on our next slide to show some images from previous Idaho Bach festivals. I've written early music made in Idaho because, not to brag and blow our own trumpet too much, but this festival has really put Idaho on the map as a center for excellence in early music performance. Here are some images just from previous festivals that I thought were really fun. At the top, we have a group of our vocal and instrumental students singing some, I think it was a beautiful madrigal in that example. At the bottom of the slide, we have the Palouse Brass Ensemble, who opened the festival for us last night, actually. This is a really special group composed of brass faculty from the University of Idaho and from Washington State University. So you can imagine the sound. Last night in the auditorium, their opening gala performance just lifted the roof off the place. And it made me feel so incredibly grateful that we can have concerts again. One of the wonderful things about Bach's music, and music in general, is its capacity for community building. And the fact that for so long we couldn't have concerts was really hard on everybody involved. So it just brought me so much joy to observe this event last night. In the middle of the slide, this is an image from one of our community partners in Bach music making. This is in First Presbyterian Church here in Moscow, where one year we had all the best organists in the area giving an organ recital. So that was a very special moment for me. And at the right of the slide, Chris, I couldn't resist putting a picture of you in action, doing the thing that you do so wonderfully, singing Bach's music. This festival has also led to some student initiatives in early music research. It's been really a joyful experience over the years when the students saw what we were doing with our own interest in early music, and they wanted to be part of it too. So it's been absolutely wonderful that every year we've been able to offer student performances that they have prepared themselves just out of the sheer love and joy of making early music together. These are some of my favorite images from over the years. On Wednesday night, as you mentioned, Chris, we're going to have some small ensembles and solos from our students. And then we'll culminate in the grand finale, which will be this performance of Bach's wonderful large-scale cantata Ein Festburg ist unser Gott, which is kind of like, I guess we could call it a statement of faith. So here are some of the images. I just thought it was fun to show these of posters from over the years. I've always really enjoyed the wonderful art of the University of Idaho graphic designer Carla Schaber, who's made most of the posters that we've used over the years. So this brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is maybe just celebrating some of the things that have been our absolute top highlights from over the years of the Idaho Bach Festival. So Chris, I thought it would be good for you to go first. Now, in 2017, that was a really special year for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, so 2017, we had Lucas Harris was a guest theorbist. He's from actually Toronto. He came down. He's one of the leading theorbists in the world, and he didn't disappoint. He presented master classes. Of course, he collaborated on a project of mine that I'll tell you about in a minute. And he was just an absolute lovely colleague and human being. You see him here in the picture, working with our guitar students and giving them some early music instruction. I see that Miranda put up an old picture of my sort of maybe one of my drafts of my project, which was this gentleman, Johann Nauvach. And in 2017, I was busy at work on an edition, a performance edition of this early German composer. Nauvach was a gentleman who was a lutenist and theorbo player who traveled down to Venice. Actually, he didn't travel to Venice. He went to Florence, and he worked with a lute player there, Allegri. And but he was sent there to then bring back the Italian style, the new kind of concerted style, and the Italian style of playing the lute and playing the lute in song back to Germany. Lucky for him, it was during the 30 Years' War, so he was probably really happy to go, and so he didn't die. And but anyway, he came back. He published an amazing volume of music that was actually published for a wedding, and in 1627. And this wedding was actually the same wedding where the first German opera by a gentleman by the name of Heinrich Schütz, where Heinrich Schütz had an opera Daphne performed, and the poetry of Daphne was adapted by Martin Opitz, and the poetry in this volume that I created the edition from Nauvach's work was also, that poetry was also Opitz's. So yeah, really exciting stuff. And sorry, my phone just rang. I just turned it off. And I really enjoyed, I think that concert was really special because, of course, my wife Lynette was on it, and a lot of those pieces are duets, so we had an opportunity to sing together. But of course, Miranda played beautifully on that. Let's see, our colleague Rajang Young played harpsichord on that performance, and of course Lucas played theorbo, and then my sister came out. My sister came out from Des Moines, fabulous violinist, professional violinist, and she joined us as well on that. So really special time. And I think the result was I got the edition finished. It was part of a dissertation project for me, and I got that all wrapped up. So I guess it had a happy ending, Miranda.
Well, 2017 was a huge highlight for me as well, because as you mentioned, I was part of the performance of this amazing performance edition that you made of the music of Johann Bach. For me, that was a really special occasion. Now, we call it the Idaho Bach Festival, but it's not necessarily always about Bach. And Johann Bach is not as well known as Bach, but we can consider him an important predecessor of Bach. Yes. And you know, the other thing that really struck me about the music that we were working on in 2017 by Bach was that it was in German, although, you know, the kind of German that they were speaking a few centuries ago. So it's not exactly like the modern German that I learned in college. And at the same time, the music was almost Italianate. It had this kind of Monteverdian gorgeousness. And it was such a highlight, not only to work with you and your specialization in early music vocal performance, but to have the harpsichord, to have the guest theorbo player, to have our small string ensemble, and to have the feeling that we had a role in creating or recreating, you might say, this amazing music that hadn't been very available for hundreds of years that we would just bring it to life.
Absolutely, Miranda. And I would say that the thing that I think is true about that performance, of course, we never know, but I think it may have been the first full performance of that volume since that wedding. So it's incredible. And also there's a kind of a comic irony about the whole thing, because the last piece in the volume was actually written by Heinrich Schütz, which was, Schütz was probably the most important German composer before Bach. And at the end of that piece, there's a little pun that's written in the text, possibly by Opitz, where he calls Naubach, he puns Naubach's name, calling him the Neuen Bach. And so he actually, and there's this, in this lighthearted trio at the end, to think that they were calling Naubach, punning his name, calling him Neuen Bach, and then to think that, you know, what are we 400 years later doing this on a Bach festival, and that Bach's name, of course, means brook, right? So they were calling him the new stream, the new brook through which the new music was flowing from Italy up into Germany. And then, of course, the old Bach is probably the younger Bach, which is the Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. So anyway, good stuff.
So if I were forced to pick a favorite year of the Idaho Bach Festival for me, it would actually be the next year, 2018, which I call the year of the 5-string cello. Now, if you're familiar with the cello, you'll know that cellos typically only have 4 strings. So why would we want to have a 5-string cello? Well, I had been thinking for a number of years about putting on a performance of all of Bach's 6 unaccompanied suites for cello. The reason I've been putting it off is because number 6 of the set in D major is actually written for a 5-string cello. Now, can you play it on the standard 4-string cello? You can. But it's very difficult because you have to play very high up the strings, and there are a number of chords that are so difficult to play that they're real finger twisters. And I have been dreaming of having a 5-string cello since forever. The only problem is that they're extremely rare. There aren't very many surviving 5-string cellos from the period, for the very good reason that they were cut down to make smaller cellos. They were given to children, and children then and now always trash their cellos. So I couldn't very well travel around the world trying all the 5-string cellos to figure out what this was going to be about. I kind of had to do something sight unseen. Thanks to the generosity of a grant given to me by Class and ORID with some combined funds, I was actually able to purchase a 5-string cello. I call it my 21st century solution to an 18th century problem, because nobody really knows what the original 5-string cello was like, its size, its manner of playing, exactly what it sounded like. So I decided that it would be fun to order one from a company that makes instruments out of carbon fiber that are acoustically very good. And I just asked them to add a 5th string onto it. So it's pretty amazing. I really like this photo I put on the slide because around the same time I got a new puppy and my puppy liked the cello even more than I did. And I got this really cute photo of her sitting on it. I promise I don't put my dogs on my cello very often. That she loved it. I've also got just a little video here to show you that this is what I did. The first thing I did when I took the cello out of the case when it arrived. I'm showing its 5 strings. So here you go. C, G, D, A is the normal stringing, but you're going to hear a high E string. So if you're curious to know what this instrument sounds like, it's going to be putting in a cameo tonight on the program. I am going to be playing a 4-string cello in a couple of the pieces on the program, but there were a couple that I thought would sound extra good in a 5-string cello because they went out very high pitched. And when you add a 5th string to a cello, that gives you a lot more high notes. And some people have said to me that they think this instrument sounds like a cello and a violin kind of got together and had a baby. So it's just incredibly fun to play. And I hope you'll be curious to come along and hear what it sounds like. So just a little shameless plug, Kenton mentioned this before, but during a sabbatical semester last year, I wrote a book about the experience of the 5-string cello and Bach's cello suites in general. And I thought I would just let everybody know about it. It's going to be published pretty soon by Fairhaven Press. This is the cover design. I really love it because it not only has a cello on it and one of Bach's manuscripts, but it also has Bach's seal, like his family crest on it. And I just thought that was a really neat design. So I'm very excited about this. It's not an academic book. It's more like a memoir of how I've played Bach's cello suites all my life. And as I've grown and changed and evolved, so has my interpretation of them. And you might say that their interpretation of me has changed too. So if you're a cellist, Bach's cello suites are kind of like the soundtrack to your life. I first started playing Bach's music when I was a child of 9, and if I'm honest, I really couldn't, I couldn't even get my fingers around the notes, like I couldn't play it. But I knew right away that it was something that was very, very special and that I wanted to do more of it. And I worked very hard over the years so that I could play them better. And so in the 2018 Idaho Bach Festival, getting to play all 6 suites in one concert, well, it took me almost 3 hours and I was very tired at the end of it. But I would say that has been one of the highlights of my career. So enough about me. Chris, why don't we talk about tonight's program a little bit?
Yeah, so let's see. I have all this stuff. I need to pull it up here because I'm
okay. Well,
I have this full screen thing going on. Maybe if you want to start, then I'll chime in.
Well, so tonight, Tuesday, October 26th at 7:30 p.m. here in the Lionel Hampton School of Music, which is located at the corner of Blake and Sweet Avenue, in Haddock Performance Hall, which is very easy to find. You just go in the main entrance and you're right there. We'll be presenting our faculty solos and ensembles concert. Just look for this banner that's on the slide and you're in the right place. We took this photo during a year when there wasn't a pandemic, so that's why we don't have masks on if you wanted. So first up on the program tonight is going to be some selections for from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, performed by one of our guest artists, Nathaniel Filippelli, who will be joining us from the Ambrose School in Southern Idaho. If you're wondering, what's a well-tempered clavier? Well, there are a lot of answers to that question. A clavier is a keyboard instrument, and we don't know exactly what keyboard instrument Bach had in mind for this piece. The most likely guess is a harpsichord, but it could have been an organ because Bach played both and was a great virtuoso on both. There's also a school of thought that he could have written it for the ancestor of the modern piano. Now, what does well-tempered mean? Well, the expression refers to the tuning of the keyboard instrument. So the well-tempered clavier is a set of keyboard pieces called preludes and fugues that appear in all 24 of the possible major and minor keys. when you temper an instrument, when you tune it, it relates to the frequencies at which the keys, at which the strings of the instruments are tuned. Nobody knows exactly how Bach intended to tune his keyboard instruments because there were a lot of different ways to do it at the time. Now, the system that we use on modern pianos is called equal temperament, and it's a way of getting every pair of adjacent notes on the modern piano to relate to each other in the same way. And what that means is that you can play in any key and you'll sound fine. But there are other ways to tune keyboard instruments, and there are a lot of theories as to the types of tunings that Bach thought were interesting. Now, I have sat through performances of the Well-Tempered Clavier where the harpsichordist would stop to retune the harpsichord between every piece for a new key. It takes a really long time. It's totally worth it, but it takes a long time. Don't worry, we're not going to do this evening. Mr. Filippelli will be playing our wonderful 9-foot Steinway grand piano that will be tuned in equal temperament. So this music tends to be a firm favorite with Bach lovers, so it's sure to be a real treat. Chris, would you introduce the next piece?
Yeah, sure. So, okay. So I'm sorry I'm having a little bit of technology issues, but I got it. So we're all good. Okay, so the next piece is this Sonata for two Leclaire. Let's see. So
Leclaire Sonata for two violins.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Miranda. This is my computer's acting up. I've got notes on stuff. Yeah, so this Leclaire Sonata. Leclaire, of course, is a contemporary of Bach's as far as being in the same time. Elizabeth Fraser is a colleague from New St. Andrews College, and Inga Kingsley teaches in our very own LHSOM prep department. As far as Miranda, do you have any, I'm not that much up on Leclaire. Do you have anything about?
Yeah, well, Leclaire is an interesting character. He was a contemporary of Bach, although they didn't meet because they were in different countries. Leclaire was in France, and he is thought to be the founder of the modern French school of violin playing. He was a great virtuoso and hugely influential on the composers and violinists and other string players at the time. He also has rather an interesting story in that was actually kind of horrible. He was the victim of a brutal murder that has actually never been solved. It's still a cold case. Investigators could never determine who the perpetrator was. Was it Leclaire's angry and embittered ex-wife? Was it his nephew? And some people think it might have actually been his gardener. So we will never know. It's very unfortunate. However, he left us a legacy of amazing violin music. So this sonata for two violins is going to be absolutely wonderful. Elizabeth is a new professor at New St. Andrews College. She has only just arrived this semester. She is a magnificent violinist, and so is Inga Kingsley, who teaches our pre-college students. Also on the program, as part of a new initiative that we're making here at the Lionel Hampton School of Music, is we're trying to increase the diversity of things that we offer, not only in concert performances, but also in our curriculum. I'm on the School of Music Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and I feel passionately that it's a wonderful idea to try to bring more of this into what we do in concerts. Now, there's a misconception that classical music and Baroque music, early music in general, are just all about white male composers, you know, the old white man in the wig, right? Now, I love old white men in wigs. I wrote a whole book about Bach, remember? And, you know, I love them all. But I think it would be more historically accurate for us to try to present more diverse programs. It's a total myth that only white people were involved in the composition of early European music. Europe has always been a diverse region, and now amazing musicologists and scholar performers are bringing music to light by composers from maybe different backgrounds than the ones that we traditionally associate with early music. So it brings me great joy that we're going to feature some more diverse programming this evening. My violin colleague Giselle Hillier and I will be playing pieces by, first of all, Isabella Leonardo, who was an Italian Baroque composer. She was also a nun, and in her home city in northern Italy was a very highly regarded composer during her lifetime. We're going to be playing her 12th violin sonata. That's for violin, cello, and we'll be joined by Aneda Lati on harpsichord. So this is a piece absolutely gorgeous, almost operatic music for violin. It gives the most extraordinary impression of being almost improvised, although it is written down on the page, but we're adding some of our own improvised ornaments because that's part of the performance practice of early music. So it's a completely gorgeous piece. You're going to love it. Another piece that is really cool is a duo sonata in E flat that Giselle and I will be playing together. It's for violin and cello. And it is by Joseph Bolano, who's a composer who's getting a lot of attention these days. He was an older contemporary of Mozart, so a little bit later than the Baroque era that we mostly focus on in this festival. He was a sort of quite romantic character. He was half French and half Senegalese. And his career, as well as being one of the top violinists and composers in Europe, he was also a professional soldier who specialized in sword fighting. And there are some wonderful paintings of him doing just that. And in this portrait of him looking very grand in his military uniform, you'll see he's holding I think it's a rapier. I think that's what you call that kind of sword. So there are a lot of stories about his dashing deeds and sword fights, as well as his amazing violin playing. So this duo sonata is really fun to play, and that's what we'll use to open the program. Chris, would you like to talk about
yes. Well, Google finally let me back in for the notes. So hey, so we have also two more works by Bach. We have a Bete aber auch dabei, a soprano aria from Bach's Cantata number 115. It's of course typical Bach. It has religious text, and it basically discusses the God's love setting humans free from guilt. We also have a trio sonata for flute. Well, this is we have a trio sonata for flute, cello, and harpsichord. And then, of course, Miranda will be playing her 5-string cello as a cameo on both of these pieces. So thank you, Miranda. So I've been listening to the rehearsal, and it is fantastic. It's the cantata. The cantata movement is languid and slow and gorgeous. And I shamelessly wrote some ornaments in for Lynette, who that I stole from Leonard. So Leonard is, it was so funny, they were rehearsing and Ada says, well, I love those ornaments. And Lynette says, well, those are Chris's. I said, no, those are Leonard's. And I think they're probably Quantz's or somebody like that. So, but in any event, we all have a good time. Yeah, so that is the trio sonata in the Cantata 115.
Yeah, and one of the things that's so fascinating about Bach, the musician, is that he was one of the great performers of his time and also one of the great improvisers. And I think that's something that's quite little known about Baroque music, that the composer and performer were expected to be the same person and everybody was improvising. I think these days we put so much store in what the printed text on the pages that sometimes we forget that things were done a lot more flexibly at the time, both in terms of the instrumentation and the orchestration. So all of us in these two pieces, the aria from the cantata with Lynette Pfund as the soloist, and then the trio sonata, which is just for the three instrumentalists, we're all adding our own improvisations on chord progressions and ornamentation and all of those things. I sometimes think that if Bach were alive today, he would be like a modern jazz musician, because jazz has a great deal in common with Baroque music in that it's improvised, but it's improvised over an agreed upon series of chord progressions. So you might call it a kind of a premeditated sense of improvisation. But it's one of those things that is both really fun and completely terrifying. So it's just so much fun. These two pieces are both really substantial, but they have really different characters. So the aria that Lynette will be singing is a very serious and somber piece with this kind of gravity that comes from the sound of the pipe organ. We've got this amazing pipe organ in Haddock Performance Hall. And then, so it has Lynette singing these words about human suffering and human guilt, and how in Bach's religious worldview, humans are responsible for the death of Christ, but also that how Christ's love sets you free from your guilt. So it's a very serious text. And then we have these two solo parts by flute and 5-string cello that I always think of these melodic lines as something that maybe we can't say in words. Now, I'm sorry to say that, Chris, because I know that you deal in words, but I don't, so I got to justify myself somehow. So, and then the Treo Sonata, we put that last on the program because it's just so exciting. A lot of it goes really fast, and it's one of those Bach pieces that kind of reminds me of a sewing machine in the best possible way. Because it goes extremely fast and you got to keep hold of all the components all at once, because Bach's counterpoint is this amazing machine-like thing. It's like you can't fall off that horse because you're not getting back on again.
Wonderful.
Okay, so tomorrow night, please join us at the same time, 7:30 in the University Auditorium. Where we're going to have a student recital. Chris, would you like to talk about some of the pieces that will be on the program?
Yeah, sure. So the first half of the student concert has some works by Bach, and Bach's contemporaries, of course, are also featured. We have a prelude and fugue in C minor, solo flute partita in A minor, a richer car for solo cello by Dominico Gabrielli. He was an Italian predecessor of Bach. And Miranda can probably knows this better than me, but possibly whose solo cello music may have inspired Bach's 6 cello suites.
Yeah, we're going to hear the first composition for solo cello that was ever written, as far as we know, as far as scholars have been able to determine. So Domenico Gabrielli is this man on the right top corner of the slide, pictured here with his dog, which as a dog lover, I am very much in favor of bringing your dog to work. He was a cellist and composer who worked at the enormous church of San Petronio in Bologna, Italy. And he was one of the early cello virtuosi. Now, at this time, cello wasn't a standardized instrument. And so it had all sorts of names. Nobody could agree on what its name was, how big it was, how to tune it, etc. Gabrielli wrote a number of solo pieces and also some pieces for cello and other instruments, and was really a pioneer. Now, we don't know if Bach knew his Recitale for cello. However, it's possible. It's possible. So in addition to that, in the Bach works on the program, I put pictures of some other composers in the slides just to inspire everybody. On the left here is Georg Philipp Telemann, a contemporary of Bach, and we're going to hear one of his solo flute pieces played by one of our flute students.
Miranda,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I had actually a question. I noticed that was one of the fantasies, or what are they called? The Fantasia. And I'm wondering if that's from Leonard's edition. He just published that edition.
Yes, I believe the student will be playing from Leonard's edition. Because he published it especially for performers. So it's what we call a scholarly performing edition. So one that can stand up to musicological scrutiny, but is also practical for the performers in terms of performance directions for performance practices. So it'll be incredibly exciting. We could think of this as like a next generation performance of the scholarly work that Professor Garrison has been doing for so many years, and has recently released a CD of his performance of his own edition. So it was incredibly exciting. We're also in the middle of the slide, we've got Henry Purcell, great English composer of the Baroque era, and we will have a student string ensemble, a small ensemble, playing some of his string music. And as you mentioned before, Chris, will wrap up the program with the grand finale, this wonderful cantata Ein feste Burg ist unser Gott, meaning a mighty fortress is our God, one of Bach's best known cantatas. Now that's featuring some of your students as vocal soloists, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, and so one of our graduate students, Elisa Toy, will be the soprano soloist, a transfer student from Texas, who is a junior this year. Sally Cross will be singing the alto part. Derek Carson, who is, let's see, he's an undergraduate student here. He'll be our tenor. And then Christian Reed is going to sing the baritone / bass parts in this. And in fact, I was just meeting with Christian today. He just graduated last spring, and he's still in Moscow, and he sounds fantastic. So soprano baritone duets, arias, but of course, in speaking with Dr. Clement, who directs the choir, they have had a very, I would say, a super meaningful experience preparing this, and one of togetherness and working together and having choir again after not being together traditionally last year. I think it's going to be extremely special for everyone involved, and the piece is so it's such a beautiful, powerful work. And yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier, Miranda. It's sort of like a statement of faith for Bach, this piece. And so it's definitely worth coming and hearing.
Yeah, this is going to be so special for us just to have that number of students on the stage.
Yep.
Our whole orchestra, the Vandaliers, this big choir of vocal majors, and of course our 4 very accomplished soloists, all directed by Dr. Clement. Now, for so long, our students have had to go without their large ensemble experiences, and it's just so meaningful that we get to do this again. And I don't know about you, Chris, but my students have been just so grateful this semester for the gift of music. And, my students have always been very nice. I've always been very lucky to have extremely nice students, but this year they start saying thank you all the time. They're so grateful just for getting to make music. And it really warms my heart that this is a thing that we get to do. So I really hope that people will join us for this wonderful experience.
Indeed, they've worked so hard.
So for more details about this event, please visit our Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/Idaho Bach Festival. Please like us on Facebook. Please like us for real. That'd be good too. So as we conclude this, any final thoughts, Chris? And shall we maybe open up the microphones for some comments and questions?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Well, thank you, Chris and Miranda, for the great introduction. And I'm only sorry we couldn't have done it a week ago so that we could build interest in last night's concert. But I'm hoping that the people that hear today's presentation will be motivated to attend both tonight and tomorrow. So we do have a question in the chat from Michael Kite. He writes, Yo-Yo Ma has recorded the Bach cello suites 3 times over his career, each distinctive and reflective of changes in his understanding of the suites. For Miranda, has your perspective on how you play the cello suites changed over the many years that you have played them, and how has that perspective changed?
That's a great question, and I love to be asked that. It's interesting because I went from the place of exploring the notes for the first time when I was really probably far too young and I couldn't play them. But as I lived with them for longer and became perhaps slightly more adept at playing them, I started changing them every time I played them. And every time I play them now, I think of something different to do it. I can always find something new within their notes, as if they possess a life of their own. And I find it quite extraordinary how much you can find within the notes. I would say I'm always very open to influences from other cellists. As you rightly point out, Michael, Yo-Yo Ma has now recorded the Bach cello suites 3 times. If you listen to these 3 recordings back to back, they're all amazing and they're all completely different. Another cellist who's recorded the Bach suites multiple times is the Dutch cellist Peter Wispelwey, with similar experiences. And Wispelwey has said he intends to record them every decade. So he's going to do another one again soon, I guess. And so interesting because, as you know, there's so many variables in terms of how fast you're going to play, how fast you're going to pull your bow, how many notes you're going to put within a single bow stroke, how you're going to phrase something. Are you going to speed up? Are you going to slow down? Are you going to improvise? That changes every time. But I'm also hugely influenced by my colleagues and musicians on other instruments. For example, every time I hear Chris sing, this like, I'm going to embarrass you now, Chris, but like this like almost unbearable beauty of Chris's voice, I want to sound like that on a cello. Every time I hear Chris singing, I'm like, I want to do that. Now, I'm not going to sing for you because my singing's awful. However, it's my goal to be more like Chris. You know, every time I see that my very dear colleague Dan Buckfitch is here. Every time I hear Dan playing his drums, I'm like, oh, how can I do rhythm more like Dan?
Yeah.
So I'd say my playing of Bach changes every day in response to more and more influences and inspirations from everything around me. And my colleagues have a lot to do with that.
That's very kind, Miranda. That's very kind. I can think of about 100 ways in which I should be more like you. So
we have a question in the chat from someone in our Zoom audience asking about personal health and safety concerns about attending the concert in person. And I won't read the full text, but he's wondering, will there be enforcement of the mask requirement for the both the auditorium and the recital hall? And is there a streaming option for anyone who doesn't feel comfortable attending either the next two concerts in person?
Right, and you know what, I hear those concerns. We will not be live streaming the concert. However, it will be videoed, and I anticipate the performers will put videos of certain pieces on their own YouTube channels. We may explore an option of streaming the performances at a later date on the Lionel Hampton School of Music Facebook page. In response to the other part of the question, yes, mask mandates are strictly enforced here. It is my understanding that our crew members have been told that any problems with masks, they're to call campus security right away. All performers will be masked this evening, except when they are singing vocal solos or playing a woodwind instrument, but only for when that is happening. Then the mask goes back on as soon as they finish doing that. The audience is expected to be masked, and I anticipate that if you're concerned about exposure, it may be possible to socially distance in the hall if you sit a little bit off to the side, maybe because most people tend to congregate in the middle of the hall. So that would be my recommendation if you would like to come, but you're feeling a bit nervous.
And I would just add on that some of the good news is that actually some of the performance halls have some of the best air exchange that we have observed on campus. And in particular, the administrative auditorium, if you come to the Wednesday night concert, the air intake is actually on the front of the stage. Actually, there's air intake everywhere, but one of the major air intakes is right at the base front of the stage. So I think as far as, you know, obviously we never know how safe we are, right, in these situations, and nothing's perfect. But I know that it can be a little bit nerve rattling to sit in a hall and wonder if this air is just sitting in here forever. And there are pretty healthy air exchanges going on. Not saying it's perfect, but we have thought a lot about that over the last year and a half.
It's also my understanding, Chris, that when the air quality and air conditioning system in Haddock Performance Hall was measured last year, it was found that it was actually really good because it's the most modern part of the School of Music. So it is a very well ventilated space. But yeah, I hear the anxiety here. I've only just started attending concerts again myself. And the first time it felt like this out of body experience. It felt really strange. I was like, oh, people, these other humans, and I don't know how to interact with them anymore. And I felt very awkward. But you know what I personally do, because I have been going to concerts because I just can't not go to concerts because it's important for my soul to go to concerts. I actually double mask, and one of my masks, I put a filter in it, so actually it's kind of like triple protection, something like that. We have abundant supplies of hand sanitizer all over the music building, and you know, if you don't feel comfortable coming, then I get it. But I encourage folks to come if you feel comfortable with it.
Thank you for those questions, and thanks, Chris and Miranda, for your thoughtful answers. And while we're waiting to see if anyone in the audience has a question, I would like to revisit a previous colloquium about the Bach Festival, and that was October 14th of 2014, when Michael Murphy presented on how to listen to Bach. And let me read you just a little bit of his abstract. Who is this phenomenon we know today as Johann Sebastian Bach? Why have his music and personality captured the hearts and minds of so many in history to present day? Why do people of various socioeconomic, religious, and ideological persuasions continue to be so captivated and intrigued by his music? Well, we could probably spend an entire hour on those three questions, but I wondered if you could speak both to the enduring appeal of this music, but also maybe some practical tips for how to listen to it. What would be helpful to maximize your experience as a member of the audience interacting with this music that was written several hundred years ago?
That's a great question, Kenton. I think classical music sometimes has a reputation for being this slightly stuffy thing that you have to know a lot about it before you can enjoy it. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. And Bach in particular is one of those composers that is so well known, like probably all of us, even people without specific musical training, can probably like recognize some themes by Bach, even if they don't know that they're by Bach. Bach is one of those composers who kind of meets you where you are. You can listen to him right away and get something from it. Now, when you study Bach in an academic way and you analyze the way all the different component parts of this clockwork machine work, you know, that is its own very nerdy kind of pleasure. However, you don't need to do that to enjoy the music of Bach. I think one way in which Bach really touches our hearts and has this kind of immediate emotional appeal is because here is a person who really understands suffering. Now, if you've ever had any suffering, which I bet you have, there's something extraordinarily consoling about the power of Bach's music. He really makes you feel as if he's been there too. I remember in one year's Idaho Bach Festival, when our guest artist was the baritone Paul Max Tipton, we performed the cantata Ich habe genug, which means I have enough. And I have never come so close to breaking down in tears on the stage in my life. This cantata, like, I have enough. It's about, all of us feel like we don't have enough. It's like we're always striving for something and it's never enough for us. And we're not enough and it's not enough and nothing is enough and we are inadequate and it doesn't work. This cantata is about how you don't need the trappings of the world because you already have enough. And there's something about that cantata that just gives me goosebumps every time. In the middle movement, the words are "close your weary eyes," and it's a kind of a lullaby, and it's one of Bach's what we call death lullabies. And it's thought that he wrote it in response to his toddler daughter, who was 3 years old, just died, and it's like Bach's way of singing a lullaby to her, saying, "Don't be frightened. It's going to be just like falling asleep." The year that we performed that work, I myself had a 3-year-old daughter who was at home sleeping, and I lost it. I was like trying so hard not to cry as I was playing my cello bass line on the stage, and like Paul's voice was just so gorgeous, and like I have seldom been so moved by a piece of music in my life. It's that kind of thing. that makes me keep listening to Bach. It's the kind of music that speaks to us because it's somebody who understands sorrow. You know, both his parents died before he was 10. Of the 20 children that he fathered, half of them died before they reached adulthood. Imagine farewelling 10 children. It's the sorrow is just unspeakable. Bach, as most people know, was an intensely religious person. And I think maybe you'd agree with me, Chris, here that he really needed this to be true. So when he sings about, I don't need anything that the world has because I have everything that I need, which is his Lutheran concept of salvation. Whether or not you're religious, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because his worldview is so powerful that you cannot help getting into that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he had tapped into those really deep archetypes, you know, and so those those sustained him, and I think those are things that everybody can observe and relate to. The other thing that I like about listening to Bach is, of course, that Bach was a huge fan of dancing and dance music. And I think a lot of people, when they listen to Bach, they don't realize that, 3/4 of it is dance music, and so we all like to, we all enjoy listening to, to 19th century, 19th century waltzes and things like that. But there's a lot of that in Bach. So if you listen carefully and you start envisioning, what that might look like at an 18th century dance, you can start to understand that this is, a lot of it's frivolous, light, joyful, fun, and wonderfully complicated.
And you know what? That idea of the dance, it crops up in the sacred music as well.
Yep.
And that's because in Bach, the sacred and secular are kind of the same thing. They're so blurred together.
Yeah, it's marvelous.
So other questions from the audience? Perhaps some of the other musicians on screen, Dan or Kristen, any observations or insights that you'd like to share? Or if anyone would like to put something into the chat, I'm glad to read it if you're uncomfortable unmuting and going on camera.
I see that Oliver's turned his microphone on.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, here, let me get on camera
Oliver.
here. Hi, hello, everybody.
Hey.
Hi, Oliver.
I was wondering, and I had a quick question about for students at the University of Idaho, like me in an undergrad still, I would love to get, I'm a bassoon player myself, and I would love to get more involved in learning like continua playing and really understanding like more, say, like figured bass. And I just would love, and I've always loved watching and kind of enjoying the Bach Festival and Bach concerts and all that since I've been a freshman here. But I was curious if there's anything I can do to really, in years coming, or, maybe this during this festival, if there's anything I can do to get more involved or to be really, to play more Bach, basically.
This is music to my ears, Oliver. We would absolutely love to make more music with you. Come by my office and we're going to talk about continuo playing, which is one of the most fun things ever. And also, I'm sure you know that your teacher is a magnificent continuo player himself, so I'm sure you can get that from your lessons as well. Yeah, absolutely. We would love to do this. Chris and I have been talking for a really long time that we want to start an early music ensemble for the students. Now, have we done it? We have not, but we're totally going to do it, and we're going to do it before you graduate, and you're going to be in it now.
Great. Yeah, I would love to. That's great to hear.
Well, thank you, Oliver, for being here, and Miranda and Chris for your presentation. And before we adjourn, I'd like to invite everyone in the audience to either turn on your camera and do a hand applause, or just put up the single hand in the Zoom screen to show our appreciation. And I know it's a busy week on campus, and we're grateful for the time and the love that you show for music in particular, but also for this composer. So thank you, everyone. We'll be back here next Tuesday at 12:30 Pacific time for a regular colloquium presentation, more conventional illustrated lecture by Lucas Jongvorst from the Department of Psychology and Communication. Hope to see you then. Thanks again, and keep making beautiful music, Chris and Miranda.
Thanks, Kenton.
So bye for now.
Okay.